2015, I met Gwen Jorgenson at a triathlon camp in the US. This was a year before she won the gold medal at the Rio Olympic Games. She returned to running, which was her original sport, for the last 5 years and has run professionally since then. But she's now returned back to triathlon in the lead up for the next Olympic Games. And on her YouTube channel, she posted a video. And I want to show you some clips from a recent video that she posted to her YouTube channel that has very helpful cues and ways to think about your swimming, especially if you're just returning to the pool after several weeks or several months out.
So I'm starting out tracing, which just kind of means like light, like you're tracing a piece of paper very lightly and you don't want to like break through the paper or the pencil. So just kind of getting good form. We're working on strength, building that up right now because I don't have a ton of strength right now. I'm going to continue to put more pressure as the 50 goes on so that I'm getting faster towards the end, having more power towards the end.
I really like that cue of tracing. You can think of it as being really, really light, really relaxed, similar to the cue that we use of soft hands. If you think about tracing, being loose, being relaxed, especially over the top of the water in your recovery, keeping relaxed wrists, relaxed hands as you come over the top, that's a really good way to then feel the pressure a whole lot better through your catch and pull, what's happening under the water. And when I'm training, when I'm swimming, in the warm-up especially, I really try and just keep loose and relaxed. I want to keep my kick, I want to keep my arms, I want to keep it all pretty relaxed. And that way I find not only do I warm up better, but my feel for the water tends to be a little bit better as well. Rather than if I get in there and you just go hammer and tong, you're just tense and you're really trying to force things from the beginning. And I had an email from a swimmer last week actually who said, I'm getting tired after the first 200 meters when I swim. What should I do? And one recommendation I had was just take it easy. That concept of tracing could be a really good cue for that person. One of the best swim coaches in our era has been Dennis Cottrell. He's coached some of the best long distance freestylers that we've seen. And one of the cues or one of the things that I've heard him mention before is constant pressure. And you hear Gwen talk about it there, keeping pressure on the water. By constant pressure, we think about always having either your left hand and forearm or your right hand and forearm just having some sort of pressure on the water. We don't want any dead spots where there's a big pause out the front. We just will always want to keep constant pressure because then that keeps us moving forwards. Now, it doesn't mean that we obviously spin the wheels, but just transitioning from your left side to your right side with pressure on the left or right is a good way to make sure that you keep your momentum and speed going through the water.
I want to look at the clock, I want to send off, I want that feedback, but right now I'm really just working on staying in the moment and staying with keeping the form more so than the pace. We know that we need to have form in order to get pace its fastest pace later on.
Having not swum nearly as much as she would have in the lead up to the Rio Olympics, having run for the last couple of years, I'm guessing that her times are a fair bit off where she would have been at her peak leading up to the 2016 Olympics. And especially as an elite athlete, a professional athlete, that could be a little bit disheartening if you're looking at the times and going, I am 5, maybe 10 seconds slower than where I have been in the past. But you can't get there by trying to force it or rush it. It's going to take time to build up the strength, the swim fitness, and the feel for the water. And the best swimmers in the world are typically the ones who can obviously have that fitness, but hold their technique throughout the entire duration of a race. If you fall apart, if your technique falls apart, that's when your times will drop off. So for most people, the more important thing is to make sure that you maintain good form throughout your training session. It's okay to let it slip a little bit, especially towards the end as you're starting to push the pace, but we don't want to practice bad technique or bad form. It's certainly okay to get to that point, but we don't want to train or swim that way for very long at all. It's about how can you maintain good form for the entire session, especially when you're building up and you're just starting back out, maybe coming out of an off season. So focusing primarily on form to begin with, then adding in or tracking the time would be a better approach for a lot of swimmers.
Yep, so today I'm really working on keeping a high elbow, especially with my right elbow when I breathe to the left side, and making sure, so if I can't keep the high elbow, I'm gonna have a deeper catch because that makes it easier. And then as well, focusing on just keeping pressure on, I'll call this like my plate. So making sure that there's a lot of pressure on that plate going through the water.
Where most faults come into the stroke is when people breathe. If you give someone a snorkel, they can generally swim fairly well, although obviously there's some differences there. But generally, it's the breathing that will cause the majority of the issues. So for her, she said that when she breathes to one side, her catch usually isn't quite as good, so she needs to think about that. And I see that across the board with the thousands of different swimmers and triathletes that I've analysed over the last couple of years. It's often the breathing strokes. And one thing that stands out to me is that a lot of people, when they go to breathe, they rotate their shoulders and sometimes their hips too far. So then their arm drops down and they just can't hold a good catch. So just make sure that you're not over rotating when you turn to breathe. Get to that 30 to 40 degrees, then it's so much easier to have a good catch on that side. So that's one thing that stands out from what I've seen working with lots of different people. The other thing too is when people turn to breathe, they're either breathing late, so they just turn their head too late and then it's out of time with the rest of their stroke, or they're looking too high or too far forwards or behind them, and then that causes that over rotation. So if you can just breathe to the side, rotate 30 to 40 degrees through your hips and shoulders, so much easier to get a good catch on that side. And if you can get that sorted, then that can remove or smooth out a lot of those other errors and flaws that we see in the stroke. The one other thing she mentioned there was her plate. So she talks about her hand and her forearm as a plate, as the thing that helps you move forwards. And the way I think of that is this is your big paddle, your hand and forearm. If you bend the wrist too much in either direction, you essentially halve your paddle, sometimes even by a third almost. So you've got to keep your hand and forearm together. So I think about keeping that as you want to elevate the wrist slightly, not like this, so not a big bend in the wrist, but just keep the wrist up slightly, because then you can keep all that surface area working for you. Because as soon as you drop the wrist, then you don't keep the pressure on your hand very well. So I like the thought of hand and forearm is one unit, it's one big paddle, it's your plate, and that's what helps you move through the water. So I thought that was a really good video to demonstrate a couple of the key points that are important for many triathletes when they're thinking about swimming. So you can go and check out Gwen's channel. She's posting videos fairly regularly, so good to follow her journey in the lead up to the Olympics. If you're looking to improve your own technique, you might check out our Effortless Swimming membership, where we've got several technique courses that are going to help you, whether you're a beginner or an intermediate, or you're at the pointy end of the field already and just want to get a little bit faster. I help swimmers and triathletes all around the world improve their swimming so that it's more efficient, it's faster, and it feels good as well. So I'll put some links below where you can check out the Effortless Swimming membership. Thanks for watching. See you next week.